Well, it's already March the 16th. I'm your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I hope you're doing well. It's 2023, and most of our species have already been wiped out due to 80 years of emissions and dumping and accidents. And they're after us. They're after us through the food chain. They've poisoned the well. Did the nuclear industry build nuclear power plants and farmlands worldwide to maim, poison, kill people? And the right answer is, of course it did. It's the nuclear industry, Dana. Hope everybody had a good day, if that's possible, in this madness. Always takes me a minute to get up to bashing speed. So we got a poll. You can call in if you like, or text me, 709-589-4406, and ask for the Gamma Goat. I am the Gamma Goat. According to the nuclear industry, might as well embrace the grind. The big question, because radiation is so lethal, particularly to children and species, which are the most vulnerable, and female children have 4 times more tumors than males. That's going to be true in all the species. There's no such thing as a leak from a nuclear power plant. It's an event every time. Why are the nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? There could only be one possible reason when you actually analyze what's going on here. You're talking about the fuel pools in every nuclear power plant is hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Right? It's still splitting the atom. It's a perpetual disease factory. Don't tell that to the nuclear industry, you'll spoil their day. They're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. So if you think there's anybody in control of the nuclear industry, you're delusional, unfortunately. They're growing food alongside, in a nuclear wasteland, in an exclusion zone, a no-go zone, right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation that was picked up in the same spot where they're growing it. And we're talking about 30 million 1-ton bags. The reactors are still melting down in Japan, and the fuel pools have detonated and ejected. When you go to the media, they're going to convince you that it's harmless and innocuous and benign, when that's simply not true. Your military is using dirty bombs instead of bullets. Your Atoms for Humanity, Atoms for Peace, is a genocide machine. We're growing food alongside of 1-ton bags. It shows you how completely disconnected they are. They couldn't care less about you. We got a big leak we're going to cover right away in Minnesota, I think it was, or the Mississippi River. Yeah, Minnesota. I keep thinking of Japan's Minnesota. Minnesota, which is a nuclear wasteland in Japan. A lot of times whenever... But anyway, this is in America. Regulators says they're monitoring the cleanup of a leak, which is 9,045-gallon drums. 9,045-gallon drums is not a leak. A leak is a couple of gallons. Right? Not 1.6 million liters, but a couple of gallons. A couple of liters would be a leak, not 1.6 million liters. Okay, so this is a serious story. Wait till you get a load of this story. This is just a breaking story. Again, right, they have the arrogance, this hubris to claim that it's a leak. And this happened in November. They just decided to tell you now, over 4 months later. It's still leaking. You got me using the word now. It's still hemorrhaging into the environment. They're calling it tritium, the ultimate insult. Tritium, these are not can-do reactors, okay? So the only thing that could be leaking, hemorrhaging out of these facilities. Let me try to break that down for you. I'll bring up the calculator. So you got 400,000 gallons, because normally they measure it in liters, right? There's 4 liters in a gallon. That's 1.6 million. I'm going to divide that by 4 months. So let's divide that by 120 days. That's 13,000 liters a day. There's 13,000 liters a day sound like a leak. Divided by 24 hours in a day. It's 555 liters an hour. Divide that by 60 for minutes. And that's 10 liters a minute. That's hemorrhaging. Because we're talking about radioactive substances. When the water evaporates, you liberate the isotopes back into the environment where they pulse energy for millions of years. So did the nuclear industry build nuclear power plants in farmlands worldwide to poison, maim, and kill people? There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies, injuries. It's not just okay, let's keep going on this story. This is such an important story. No matter wherever I'm to. Where are you to, Danny? Get back in the picture. Company said there's no danger to the public. Which, you hear this, they could have lost 600 trillion billion gallons. There'd be no danger to the public. It's just tritium. The plant's melting now. Don't worry, it's just tritium. All the radiation will stay in the ashes. And that's what they say about Fukushima, by the way. Company said there's no danger. The company. The killers says there's no danger to the murderer says there's no dangers to the public. Xcel Energy, which had a massive release in 2009, took swift action to contain the leak. Swift. Well, they didn't know it was happening, as you'll see right away. Let's just tell lies after lies. So 400,000 gallons is also equal to almost 9,000 45-gallon drums. 9,000 45-gallon drums. So we're talking about, these are dirty bombs by the liter. So let me go back. 8888 was the number, right? Divide that by 24 hours. That's 370 45-gallon drums an hour. 307 45-gallon drums every hour. That's not a leak. It's ridiculous to call it a leak, and it's been going on that they admit to, as you'll see. Let's get into that, because the story is batshit crazy that they would come out and say something like this. The numbers they're talking about are more than what Japan admitted to and was put into the models, the radioactive fallout models. Here's a smaller amount put into a model based on 16 days. This is from France. It covers the entire planet in radioactive fallout because there's no such thing as a leak in nuclear, because a gram would have 37 billion times 120. So multiply 37 billion by 120 to get the anthropogenic man-made atoms that are being released. And consider a single atom could cause up one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases, and over 30, 40, 50 years would result in a tumor because your body attacks it for the rest of your life. 16 days of radioactive fallout from Japan. Xcel's nuclear power plant would have emitted a lot more, according to TEPCO. Okay. Reported the leak, again they're going to call 370 45-gallon drums a day a leak of water, and each liter contained, like we had radioactive fallout after Japan and Canada and the United States at 220 million atoms per liter of 129 iodine with a 15 million year half-life. In other words, it never goes away. Saturates the thyroid glands of all the insects and children and everything else, and they start producing radioactive hormones. And for the kids of all species, including humans, it ends up in the bone marrow, in the bones, and mutates the stem cells, amongst all the other stuff it's going to be doing. And again, where did all the tritium come from? Where did this so-called tritiated water, radioactive water, come from? Now they're planning on storing it, building tanks to store it or reuse it. To state and federal authorities, they reported it to the state and federal authorities in November. Still not made public, which is even worse. Was not made public until Thursday. Today. And state officials says they waited to get more information before going public. You know why you have sirens, 100 sirens around a nuclear power plant? So you don't wait. And you don't wait 3 months to use the sirens. So 3 months later, 4 months later, should they be using their sirens now to warn the public there's a release? Why do you got the sirens there for again? So you can get out of harm's way as quick as possible. These people should be charged with crimes against humanity. And the people that thought this was okay, that thinks that's normal, that's acceptable, for such a this is a massive waste. We knew there was the presence of tritium in the monitoring wells. These are holes they dug in the ground where they suck up water, and then they test it for radiation when they get around to it. It seems they're paying for it, and these dear laboratories, it's highly unlikely they're going to report it. Because you put the laboratory out of business if they have to shut the place down. We knew there was, however, Xcel had not yet identified the source of the leak. 370 45-gallon drums a day that they emit to. How did they quantify that number, by the way? And its location, Minnesota's Pollution Control Agency spokesperson, Yahoo Doobie Idiot Machine, I'll kill everybody for a paycheck, Michael Rafferty said. Now, months after the emissions, no idea where it's coming from or how much is coming out. They're going to tell the public because now they know. You know why you got sirens? Because nobody will ever know. Until long down the road. That's why you're going to use the sirens. You're not going to wait. Now that we have all the information about where the leak occurred, how much was released into the groundwater, and the contaminated groundwater is moved beyond the original location, No, water doesn't move. Water just stays wherever it falls forever. It doesn't evaporate. It doesn't go downhill. He said, adding that the water remains contained on Xcel's property. Really? You're talking about 9,045 gallon drums, right? You're talking about 1.6 million liters. Let me see you juggle 1.6 million liter jugs. And then tell me that you got this all contained. Stack up 1.6 million 1 liter containers and tell me it's contained. I really want to see that. I want to see how that works. And poses no immediate, no, because radiation happens in increments over time. You're driving past a nuclear power plant, you put the window down, you suck in a bunch of atoms, isotopes, anthropogenic man-made isotopes. 20 years later, you got heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome throughout your lineage and yourself and the community. No, like the ultimate, everything they're saying in the story is punching you in the mouth every time you ask them a question. That's what they're doing. They're punching you, kicking you, stomping on your head and your children's heads. No immediate. We're talking about anthropogenic man-made radiation. This is why we have terrorist laws. These are terrorists. They should be charged with terrorism for what they just done. Never gave anybody a chance to get out of the way. Their paycheck every week is too important. Their status in their bathroom is too important. The company said it notified the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the non-regulatory agency, and the state on the 22nd of November, the day after it confirmed the leak. So how long was it going on before they confirmed it that they don't even know where it's coming from? So let's go back 2 years, say, which came from a pipe between two buildings, they claim. Well, like, wait a second, where is this? This could only be coming from the reactor. This is the reactor leaking. So this was a high-pressure spray. And how did you miss that? Because you're supposed to inspect that constantly. Between the two, since then, has been pumping groundwater, storing, and so they got wells on site. They're pumping water up, and that's contained. Do you got any idea how batshit lunatic that statement actually is? That you're going to drill holes around this massive facility, and whatever water you pumps up is the only thing that's leaking down there, that's hemorrhaging down there, that's flowing down there. It's storing and processing. How do you you can't process tritiated water. It's radioactive water. It's like you took a screwdriver and you magnetize it. You can't demagnetize it. But this is lethal. This is gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bursts, beta rays. This is real. This is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells for millions of years. It's a biological weapon. Tritium. How do you get tritium water from this facility? These are pressurized water reactors, boiling water reactors. There is no tritiated water that leaks out in this capacity. This is radiation. This is high-level radiation from the reactor itself that's got loose. It's going to have the full range of isotopes, and it's going to be prolific. Right? Because boiling the water by splitting atoms, they're not just going to denigrate to nothing. So that water is saturated. It's saturated with 1,000 fission products. Has not been detected beyond the facility because you don't have any wells outside the facility, and in any local drinking water. How can you not have it in the drinking water when you have storage pools on site, hemorrhaging, still splitting the atoms, boiling off about 120,000 liters into the environment each day, on top of what you already got, coming directly from the reactor. I'm just saying. 24 on-site monitoring wells, big deal. Okay, think of it this way. If you got this massive huge site and you put 24 chairs around the site, and then you dug a hole down and you're sucking up a few liters of water and testing it, because that's what we're talking about. These are not pumping water up like your garden hose. You're not talking about 120 tons a day out of a garden hose type pressure coming up out of these wells. They're just taking up a couple of liters and then sending that away to get sampled. You can't recover the water. It never stops with these people. They breed evil. They're perpetual idiots that they're so, because they're willing to hurt everybody for a paycheck. The Monticello plant is 35 miles northwest of Minneapolis, upstream from the cities on the Mississippi River. Once you contaminate a river, that's forever. The river never doesn't dilute it, it spreads it out into everything. So every insect in the river, every animal, every mammal, every human is getting radioactive emissions. The water is pulsing energy. Tritium! How do you quantify tritium? You don't have anything on the site that leaks that is tritium. Everything is radioactive in the emissions we're talking about. There's no such thing as tritiated water all over on the site in large capacities. It emits a weak, again, this is the bizarre narrative. Tritium, by the way, is used in nuclear bombs. To double and triple and quadruple and many, many times the power of the atomic bomb. The harmless tritium. If I take tritium and wrap a conventional explosive around it, what is it? It's a dirty bomb. If they take tritium, wrap an explosive around it, it's harmless. It's a weak form of beta. Once it's in your body and assimilates in your body because it's in water, it wrecks your chromosomes, your DNA, and is permanent. Saying it can't penetrate the human skin when they're talking about the pulsing energy, but as water. It absorbs into the skin. Now it's assimilated into the body because it's water. Radioactive water. Of course, there's no such thing as tritium from a nuclear site. It's in order for it to be radioactive, it's man-made anthropogenic isotopes we're talking about. And tritium's one of them, of course. But this is tritium-3H we're talking about, which again they refuse to acknowledge. A person who drank the water from the spill would only get a low dose. The batshit, lunatic, crazy, betrayal, disgusting NRC non-regulatory agency says. What a despicable thing to say. What a revolting thing to say. What a manipulative, hateful thing to say. These people are no use to you alive whatsoever. At least dead, they make fertilizer, but they're no use to you when they're alive, are they? It will install a permanent solution in the spring. Do you get what's going on here? This is a real accident, and they can't deal with it until the spring. They're going to have to build a full-scale model, whatever it is, and practice with people that are not nuclear experts, because they're not going near it. This is a high-level leak, folks. Recovery efforts will continue, and it'll install a permanent solution when it gets around to it. It's probably the most revolting statement imaginable, that statement. We continue to gather and treat. You can't treat tritiated water because that's the problem, isn't it? all potentially affected water while regularly monitoring nearby groundwater sources. You can't keep it on site because it's water, it evaporates. So if it's outdoors and it's leaking, which is 370 45-gallon drums a day, that's not a leak. That's a flow. Xcel Energy is considering building storage tanks to store the contaminated water it recovers. Because it hasn't recovered anything. Because it's only taken up little samples from the wells, and that's what they're for. They're for taking up a couple of liters at a time. Everything is flowing into the Mississippi. It has been going on probably over a year by the sounds of it. It's impossible to take their word when they tell you so many lies in such a short story. Now it's going to build above ground storage tanks for the contaminated water. Or at least they didn't say tritium again. They were feeling guilty when they wrote that paragraph by the sounds of it. They should be drowned in those tanks. And it's considering options for the treatment. You can't treat it. Oh, and reuse. What are you going to reuse it for? It's not pure water anymore. It'll corrode the reactor. You can't put it back in the reactor because that's where it comes from, right? No, they wouldn't lie to you. That's what they do. They just lie. Every sentence. Not once in a while in the whole story, but every sentence. Or final disposal of the collected tritium and water. These are actual real-life demonic demons we're talking about. And this is ABC, of course, the demons of the demons themselves. Japan is preparing to release a massive amount of treated radioactive wastewater into the sea from the triple reactor meltdowns. At least they put an S on it. 12 years ago at the Fukushima Daiichi disease factory, the water contains tritium. The ultimate insult to include something like that. That's the ultimate kick you right in the nuts as you're there on the ground vomiting. What a disgusting, despicable, hateful story that was. What a revolting, hideous betrayal. What a monstrous betrayal. They'll fix it when they get around to it. When they can find someone stupid enough to go in there to get a lethal dose for. They're going to need a couple of 100 homeless to pull that one off, by the sounds of it. We got a poll. In case you didn't notice. If there's not enough madness. Did the nuclear industry build nuclear power plants in farmlands worldwide to maim, poison, and kill people? Yeah, why are most nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? And the other ones are surrounded by cities? Well, because you need some way of removing the bioaccumulation. And so you send the food to the supermarket, you buy it, get sick and die. Your children are 100 times more vulnerable than you are. The emissions go worldwide. They don't just go to the farms, but the farms that's the worst food imaginable to be eating. Well, guess what United Kingdom just done? We'll move on. It's hard to move on after reading that story. You don't even want to do the rest of the show after you read a story like I just read. Because we just had a real event on the Mississippi River. And it's no accident that they didn't mention the words bananas or potato chips or walking in the sunshine. Because a decade ago, I kicked the shit out of everybody on the internet that said it was like a banana. I viciously attacked everybody. I took it personal. I still do. We actually removed that from the narrative. because it sets me off and they knows it. I'm vicious when I hear it. The word bananas, potato chips. It's such a betrayal to me. So, where was I? There you go. That's where we left off. Okay, let me get that back. The UK classes nuclear as environmentally sustainable and unveils small modular reactors that don't exist. So rather than come up with technology that exists to solve problems, they want you to pretend nothing, geothermal, nothing exists, only nuclear. Why wouldn't you use geothermal? How could you be that complacent you wouldn't use geothermal? How did we get all this way and that's still not in the equation? And the only solution you got to solve for geothermal is drill bits that can drill down deeper, because some places worldwide you got to go a couple of extra kilometers down. But everybody has access to 1,000-degree temperatures under their feet. So every community could have its own geothermal. And what you would do is you would build the next geothermal right alongside the old one because there's nothing toxic, right? And so 40, 50 years down the road, you build a new geothermal plant alongside the old one, and when it's built, then you turn that on and turn the other one off, decommission it, and use it to build another geothermal plant somewhere else, right? Recycle it. Not with nuclear on the planet. You're not allowed to have any future, any species. In a budget speech that lasted an hour, he spent only 1 minute, a single minute, and all the media come out fawning that Hunt in the United Kingdom is going to be a nuclear renaissance. After mentioning it for a lousy 1 minute, he spent a whole minute talking about nuclear. My goodness. Nuclear power will be classed as environmentally sustainable in the European narrative green taxonomy. This was a word created by the EU to greenwash nuclear. Taxonomy was supposed to be for geothermal and wind power and tidal power and alternative energy, real actual alternative energy. All nuclear power plants need 2 gas oil coal plants just to operate. Nuclear power will be classified as environmentally sustainable, which is absurd. Giving it access to the same investment incentives as renewable energy, private investments, because Britain is not going to spend any money on it. It's $700 million or something, which is an irrelevant number for Sizewell C, right? They need 30 billion, and the government's going to kick in 700. Where did he even? That was Boris Johnson. Where did he even scratch up 700,000? That broke ass country. And look at all the morons in the background, the actual morons. To put him on a pedestal, make him feel like he has some redeeming qualities. School, and now they're saying the Quake-Hit Japan region, Quake-Hit. This school in this Quake-Hit area is what you can see. You can see the nuclear meltdown from the school window. It's in Okuma. And this is like 40 miles away. You can't go there, but they're going to bring children back into the nuclear wasteland to prop nuclear up. You didn't see that one coming tonight, did you? A school in Okuma, Fukushima Prefecture, is to open in April after a 12-year hiatus. There's nobody lives there. Everybody ran away, and way too late. Except for, the 60 or 70 elderly dementia patients they left behind to wander around and die on their own in the nuclear wasteland. because the Japanese love taking care of their elderly. Residents of the town were ordered to evacuate following the nuclear disaster. Long too late, long after. They had to escape into a plume, and nobody told them where the plume was. Only the American military knew where the plume was to. Following the nuclear disaster triggered, again they got to invoke the word triggered by the earthquake. Right, because they don't want to smear nuclear and imply that it might have melted down on their own. They got to put the word earthquake, and usually tsunamis right there too. Elementary, junior, high school education currently operates in another city. That's a radioactive wasteland, by the way. They're surrounded by millions and millions and millions. Like, their community actually has around 13 million one-ton bags stored in it, where they're going to have the schools to. And it's within eyesight of multiple reactors that have melted down and 8 fuel pools, not counting the spent fuel pool, which the evidence suggests strongly, I'll show it to you coming up, it melted down. The 14 markers, there are 14 prefectures that were banned by 55 countries, the food from it, for over a decade. But they're going to move people right back to ground zero within 2 kilometers of ongoing reactor meltdowns with vicious emissions where nuclear scientists won't go. So nuclear, people like Xcel and the rest of them can pretend that nuclear is not a genocide machine, an omnicide machine. The reopened school will have a certified child's care facility in a nuclear wasteland, providing them with scholastic experience in Okuma, the nuclear wasteland itself. Okuma is attached to the reactor site, right? And Fukushima is on the north side of the plant. They're within 2 kilometers. These are 100% nuclear wastelands. Their families lived families. In March, the town's 2 elementary schools and single junior high school had a total of 1,100 students. Aru plans to continue attending the school after her family returns to Okuma to live in the municipal housings because they had to tear down every house there. Vicious, degenerate scum to move children back into that. You degenerate, you worthless example of a human, you worthless species in the nuclear industry. You're just worthless. You're worthless people. You're the worst of the worst. I don't understand how anybody can sit in silence. I've got no concept of it. I couldn't sit in silence. I couldn't live with myself. 15 first graders, like just got out of kindergarten, to 6th graders, and 3 7th to 9th graders, equivalent to junior high, are expected to attend the school in the nuclear wasteland in April. And they think that 8 children will attend the child care facility that shouldn't exist. None of this should exist in a nuclear wasteland. Surrounded by nuclear wastelands. How the hell did we ever get to this stage? How did we de-evolve to this kind of cruelty? Renewed chain reaction feared at the spent fuel pool, storage pool. That had 11,400,000 pounds in it. Because it had 6,375 that they emit to spent fuel assemblies. But remember, they don't have a repository in Japan or anything else worldwide. So that pool is stuffed from 6 reactors from 40 years. So double that. Which, just on its own, by the way, makes Japan or Chernobyl look like a paper towel. You're talking 30 to 40 reactor cores melted down. Now, in 2020, in January, the 10th anniversary, there were 736 pictures released from a drone. When I zoomed in on them, everything was redacted, including, but not limited to, what did I do there? That's the common spent fuel pool. That's the common spent fuel pool. Now behind it are 45, transport truck containers stacked up behind it. Why is the common spent fuel pool with 6,375 assemblies that are 1,800 pounds each redacted and everything surrounding it? Reactor 6 was also redacted. Yeah, hi everybody. How's everybody doing here tonight? You can call in at 709-589-4406. Censor it all to reduce harmful rumors. That's what's going to happen too. That's the pathetic part of that one. Sake exports set record high in 2022 for the 13th year in a row from a nuclear wasteland. From a nuclear wasteland. Fueled by younger sake brewers targeting a more upscale market. Poor yuppies from overseas. This is popular and known overseas for his pet name, Drunken Whale. The radiation makes you drunk now. Has become easily recognizable to the gullible American, Canadian consumers. Here's another great story from the crazy batshit lunatic world of nuclear. Public warned over missing radioactive cylinder in Thailand that is rusted out. Look at this rusted out cylinder. They say it might be in a second-hand shop, but why would a rusted out cylinder be in a second-hand shop? Anybody? Can somebody? I gotta hire somebody to stand here with a big hammer, and every once in a while I'm gonna hit me. There you go. I can think about the pain instead of this, because the pain's a lot less harmful than what that's going to be. I took my tea, which was cold because I was working on this, and put it on the stove and turned it up on 9 in a pot just to heat the tea up, because I won't use a microwave oven, right? Destroys 85% of the nutrition in your food on top of that. The Thai authorities, and you can buy the special device to see if it's leaking radiation, because it's not radiation, but radiant. It's not a good thing to have in your home, let's put it that way. The Thai authorities fear a metal canister containing radioactive cesium with an A, which this is a British influenced story, by the way. 137, and went missing from a power plant, has been sold to a scrap metal dealer who's not going to buy rusted stuff like that, by the way, or is a second-hand shop. Why would you say or a second-hand shop? So that can't be the real picture. If you think it's in a second-hand shop, and this is normally not stored in an old rusty steel container. It's usually stored in a stainless steel container that's not going to rust. Of the Office of the Atoms for Peace, which is one of the biggest hoodwinks of humanity, is that phrase, atoms for peace. What a horrific betrayal the nuclear industry has turned out to be for all 8 million species, not just the human. The National Nuclear Energy, of course, Thailand doesn't have nuclear power, but it has Atoms for Peace office. Because the nuclear industry has infiltrated everything on your planet. It controls all your universities, all your medias. It captured them in increments over the last 80 years. They just took it over originally, right? Because of the Atoms for Peace. We got a caller coming in from long distance. Hello there. You're public.
Oh, right on. I think everybody will recognize my voice from last year or so. But you were just talking about the story of Thailand there, about that container that they were putting the used fuel in or whatever, and then they think it ended up in a secondhand shop.
Right.
Yeah, they're totally stainless. Like, they're real stainless. I've worked on these. These are full stainless. There's no such thing as rusting, containers, right?
No, that's right, yeah.
So, and they're not even like a lid. They're like spiked, so that they fit like inside of itself. It's kind of like teeth going in between each other. So on the lid. So
these are for measuring. These are for measuring thicknesses and stuff like that. These are.
Oh, okay.
This is not a nuclear power plant. Hey, did you catch that?
Again there, but still, even that, they don't use cheap steel.
No, that's right. No, thank you though. I appreciate.
And it's too full of impurities because then it gets irradiated, right?
Yeah. Well, its Wigner effect will rip that to pieces pretty quick. Did you catch the first story, Mississippi River?
No, I just got home. So I just turned on the thing. What was the first story?
First story is they just discovered, or they admit to a leak since November on the Mississippi River at, just bear with me 1 second, I'll bring it up on the screen for everybody that's joining us right now. I might have missed it too.
All plants leak. Was
a Minnesota nuclear plant, says 1.6 million liters is leaked on site. And they decided, because they didn't know where it was to or how much was leaking, they decided not to tell anybody for over 3 months. Because now they figured out where it's to, and now they decided it's okay to tell people.
Yeah, no, that's how it works.
Because that's why we got sirens around nuclear plants, to wait until we know what's happening, right?
Well, they keep people employed to service them, but they never use them.
Yeah, so 400,000 gallons is 370 45-gallon drums a day. And you worked at a lot of plants. Is that considered a leak, or is that considered a serious accident?
It depends where it is and what the contamination level is. Like, you're in different places, you'll have different leak rates because everything leaks. There's like nothing that's fully sealed ever. That's a crazy
point. And for folks who are not familiar, you called in and you were talking about years ago in Ontario, workers at a certain nuclear power plant had spiked the drinking water, the coffee machines, with radioactive water to get back at some employees.
Yeah, they had some certain incidences, and then the water, they have water fountains at Darlington, and that got contaminated somehow.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they had more than one incident here in Canada. Canada's a crazy. Yeah, anyway, so back to that container in the Philippines. The one that was lost in Australia a month or so ago was about the size of my fingernail. And this one is a massive size compared to that. This is thousands of times bigger than that one, right? So
yeah, what were they putting in it?
they claimed there was cesium-137 in it that they were using to measure thickness and steel and stuff like that. It's a device, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it's not a nuclear power plant. It was like a coal plant or something. And you know how the nuclear industry has infiltrated everybody's places, right?
You want to see power plants that leak? Go to a coal plant.
Yeah, good point.
Even I used to work up at the coal plant there in Nova Scotia. I mean, if you walk around in there, you should see all the steam leaks everywhere. It's crazy. They're leaking more than what that other plant was leaking, the 400,000 gallons or whatever.
But the 400,000 gallons is radioactive, right?
Yeah.
And it can only be coming from one area. It can only be coming from the. If it's radioactive, right? It's not going to be the steam water. It's going to be the reactor water. Where else could it come from? And they're not suggesting it's coming from the fuel pool or anything like that, right?
Okay. But it depends on how much time, right? Because you're allowed different leak rates. So, like on some of the fuel channels, I can't remember what it was, but I think it was 5 gallons a minute you could leak out of a fuel channel, and then the fueling machine will still open it up. But if it's more than that, then it won't open up the fuel channel. So when it goes to seal up, 5 gallons a minute adds up if you depending on how long it leaks for. I mean,
yeah. Well, they claim late November till now, right?
Yep.
So you're talking 9,045 gallon drums, but they have no way of quantifying that statement. They don't know themselves. They just come up with the story today, and it came just before I went live. And so I had just enough time to read the whole story. I guess they're calling it a leak. These are not 370 gallons a day, or 370 45-gallon drums a day is not a leak.
Did they say it was radioactive? Because they do have a lot of the mineralized water that gets produced, right?
Right. No, this is the radioactive water. Now, they're claiming it's just tritium, but there's nowhere on site where it's just tritium, right? Now, when it comes to the pressurized boiling water reactors, these are not CANDU reactors. The tritiated water hemorrhages they hemorrhage right from the pipes itself, right through the pores of the pipe, so to speak, right?
Oh, man, yeah. And then you can get steam cuts that are crazy.
Very high.
They're under such pressure, especially if you're talking radioactive water. Like, it's under such pressure and such heat. If you get a little, like, occlusion in the metal, it'll start to steam cut right through it.
Right, and we've covered that a long time ago. I'm glad you brought that up. That's because you've seen firsthand experience, right?
I've been right there with my face up and rated that stuff. Yep.
Lucky you, eh?
Yeah, hey, I'm still talking about it, right? So
I suppose,
can't complain too bad.
Well, you don't know until you get older. You don't know until you have children. You don't know until they grow up a bit, right? You don't know what's going to manifest down the road from these exposures. These exposures you're not talking about exposure to the fuel rods, right? So the exposure will take many years before it manifests or gets diagnosed, or cancer could take 20.
Anybody gets to the fuel rods. I got within 6 feet of a fuel channel full of rods because they couldn't take them out because it was leaking too much, and with a 6-foot freeze plug. So I was getting dosed pretty hard.
Yeah, that's scary, man. That'll come back and haunt you. You know that, right?
Do you know what's funny? I'll tell you a funny story. I had a watch. I had a Swiss Army watch, and the battery kept dying in it. So I wore it in with me into the vault, and it started working again. Not even kidding. Not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. But, I had my hands, up by the feeder tubes right on the side of the end fittings, right?
Yeah, so, these are CANDU reactors you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy,
so I'd
man.
be right there with my hands by the feeder tubes, and I'd be standing there for hours.
Really?
Really. We my dose exposure was, sometimes I'd come out with, sometimes it was pretty low, so, they would give me a combined dose of, 180 milligrams.
But these are underwater, right? Obviously.
No.
They're
No,
not.
they're like the if you look at the CANDU reactors, the fuel channels, they're all like open on the
Oh,
end.
right. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So I
They're
can stick
they're
my
like
hands kind of, yeah.
they're kind of like the British reactor that melted down and Chernobyl reactor where they got graphite. Is it? They're like
No.
they're like
They're
the
just still
graphite.
water moderated.
Yeah, they look like
They're
the
just
Go
they're
ahead.
just little channels, right? They're not like common to each other in a sense. Like they are, but they're not. So each channel is separate from the other channel. And each channel, the fuel bundles are inside, and then there's water that flows over top of the fuel bundles in each channel, and all the channels are combined into a big pressure unit.
So like 170 millisieverts.
Oh, yeah, you're
That's
killing me with this millisieverts.
well, like yeah, that's a millisievert is 1,000 microsieverts. But now normally when you talk about millisievers, you're only talking about certain.
I'm talking about
You're isolating. You're saying it's gammas, alphas, neutrons, or betas.
Yeah, they would wrap us up with dosimeters, right? So we'd have them on our feet, on our hands, on our helmet, on our forehead, and on our chest.
Because you're wearing
And
a lot of
just,
gear.
You know, yeah, pardon?
And so you're wearing a self-contained air supply.
Sometimes. And, you know, then, so they combine everything, and then they would do, like, we'd do whole body counting and stuff like that. You know, so they would take different measurements of what got in us, what was still on us, in a sense, to see what got irradiated in us. And then they would add the dosimetry badges together, and then they had lifetime feeds. So, like, when I was standing in front of the bulb, in front of the fuel channel, they would read out the readings, like the dose rates to us, and you know, sometimes we'd alarm off and stuff like that, and you're supposed to back out and all that kind of stuff. So, oh yeah, I got a funny story.
I'm not laughing.
We'll save that for another time.
I'm just trying not to cry here. That's all. That's
I'm still alive, so.
That's crazy, man. That's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard, by the way. I've heard a lot. Trust me, that's one of the craziest stories imaginable. Because like I literally would tear somebody's arms off before I would get me in there. Right? It would be like, there's no way, man. Hey, Dana, step in this room here. Like, no. I'd leave my fingers outside. I can guarantee you that much. I wouldn't be going in there.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving when they close the door on the pressure unit, but whatever. You get used to it.
I suppose. Yeah.
Not the daily.
No, well,
You know,
like when you're in it, you're in it. It's such a crazy story to me. It's normal for you because you see it happening each year, you know, and
Yeah, and you know, in the can-dos, like during refurbs, they get them pretty clean, eh? People
Yeah.
walk in, like they leave it open, right?
that's
So,
right, yeah. They're different, folks, than the boiling water reactors. They're still
they're
madness.
way better.
They're still
They're way
madness.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're because you're using pure 238, right? A lot of it, right? And then you're banging it with plutonium or something, I guess, to make it split the atoms. But the full.
No, I don't think I can tell you what it is, but I used to work on the ion chamber too. So that would fire off and kick it off. And it's a little different, but I think that's protected. I'm not sure. But they zap basically a coating.
Yeah, just let it go with that, man. I don't want to drag you into deep water because I know you don't want people to know who you are. Go ahead.
Hey, they never made me sign a non-disclosure agreement.
No, it's just good practice, right? Not.
Yeah, but you know, just I'm not out there to give out secrets.
No, of course not.
enemies
No,
either.
I know. And the stories you told us over the years is always makes you wonder about the nuclear industry, right? That's just makes you
that's another
worried. I
thing
think
too,
it's
right?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's another thing too. I wasn't gonna call, but then you had that container up there that's all rusted, and ain't nobody doing that, right? And It's just like they ran that article there last year about them having copper-lined containers. Like, you're not allowed to have copper in there. That gets irradiated, and it's finished. You can't go near it.
That's right. Yeah, it pulses energy after.
Yeah, so I laughed at that joke story when they ran that one. That was funny.
Yeah, I still make fun of that. I still use that story too, right? I kept it there in my go-to pile so that... Because they claim that if they put a 1/10 of a millimeter or something of copper on the outside of the cast, it would last for 1 million years. And it's such... The Wigner effect will wreck that in a couple of years. But I mean, that's their claim, and they're still sticking to that claim, right? And other countries are now saying, well, Canada says,
Yeah, no, it's totally insane. Any aircraft guy will tell you even that, right? Like, it's not lasting 1 million years. Come on.
Well, no, like we're careful not to use copper on boats because of the salt water will make it corrode in just no time at all, and it'll be sucking air or sucking water, see? So you can't even use it.
And that's why you guys use lead. It's sacrificial.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. Okay.
Lead doesn't last 1 million years.
No,
but,
nothing does.
The only thing I wanted to say is I kind of just alluding. I don't know if you heard the weird story of out here in Ontario, we have people attacking the snowplow drivers.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would have thought it was kind of hocus pocus.
Snow driver rage. Yeah.
It happened on my street, right?
Is that right?
And like one of the plow drivers says these people blocked him in for to stop him from going up the street, and I'm like, what is going on? These people are crazy. And that's my point. The level of everybody sees it now with the driving, with the way people are behaving in public.
Airplane rage, is increased since Fukushima. We've seen this rage. I think it's lack of oxygen because we bashed the phytoplankton worldwide, right?
Yeah, you've nailed it. You nailed it. That's what I was getting to. Is
we predict
there's a lot of things we're seeing that are actually caused by the lack of oxygen.
Right, we're predicting this by 2013 or something. We're speculating in the near future when oxygen depletes, you're going to see air rage in particular escalate, and you're going to see all kinds of people, because people have less oxygen and more, they don't think things clearly, and so they do you'll see a lot of this stupid stuff, that's the strangest one though, snowplow violence, right? I can see it.
It's widespread. It happened on my street, it happened in Oshawa, it's gone off the hook, and these aren't all, they're not all new residents to Canada. Some of these people are people, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just nothing new that the plow piles up the snow on your thing, but these people are losing it, and this is widespread. And I just worry about what people who are working at these facilities are thinking in their heads when they get angry.
Yeah, and they say road rage has gone through the roof too. I see those headlines all the time, where they acknowledge a road.
It's absolutely psycho.
Is that right?
Oh man, I'm a younger guy, kinda, and so is one of my buddies, and just the amount of road rage out there is off the chain. It's crazy, and people are driving so poorly, they're not thinking properly. It's everybody's already impaired. So everybody's impaired. Everybody's mostly cutting off or pulling out on each other, sitting there at green lights, and then stopping for them too. You see that kind of stuff. Just the most insane, nonsensical stuff. The people, and my buddy's always he's like, what's this guy doing? And I'm like, he doesn't know himself what he's doing. Right? So you can't get angry at him, but everybody wants to jump to get angry.
And another thing to consider is Canada removed all restrictions on food from the nuclear wasteland, and Japan, after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it in 14 prefectures for over a decade. So Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere for quite many years, only Canada, which meant that eventually... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't say anything.
And so eating this food will deplete because your body is attacking the isotopes with white blood cells, which is displacing your red blood cells carrying oxygen and nutrition. And point taken is oxygen, right? So with a lack of oxygen in the atmosphere, with a lack of oxygen being produced in the body because your body is saturated with white blood cells, as you bioaccumulate, you're producing even more, then you're going to see these manifestations. And I mean, really, in all honesty, that's the strangest one imaginable, because when you got a lot of snow, there's nothing better to see than the plow. Yeah, you got to keep shoveling your driveway, but without the plow, there's no point shoveling the driveway.
Give them a thumbs up. Yeah, without the plow, nobody's going anywhere. But then, literally, the people blocked off the road for like an hour. It was crazy. And then I saw that. I thought, like, this is isolated. Maybe he hit one of the cars. No. And then there's just widespread stories about this. Like, it's happened everywhere. Like, cops had to get involved. Some of them got in altercations.
That's the craziest story. That's important. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, I'm going to...
Just one more thing.
Go ahead.
When radioactive particles break down, what do they generally break down to in a stable form? I know you know this
answer.
Lead,
yeah.
And iron.
Yeah, but like they've admitted that even though they say it's harmless, it's still anthropogenic man-made lead, man-made iron, right? It still is produced.
Iron toxicity is a huge problem going on right now. A lot of people are finding out that they have way too much iron, and it's getting stored in their cells, and it like in their tissues, right? I'm not talking about the heme on the blood or any of that. So and when they test for iron, they test your blood, and a lot of people are lacking heme in their blood, red blood cells, and so their doctors are prescribing to them to take more iron, but they actually have a whole bunch of, they're actually iron, they have an abundance of iron in their cells, and it's oxidizing them, and it causes people to get angry and be rageful.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that would be neato for you to look into a bit more.
Yeah, I've got to go down that rabbit hole tonight after the show. That's holy shit stuff, by the way.
Yeah, no.
You're awesome tonight, man. You're bringing it tonight. That's great.
I'm just catching up a bit. You've been gone for a while.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy news tonight.
Iron is one of the hardest things to chelate out of your blood, or like out of your body. You don't necessarily want to get it out of your blood, but to get it out, overabundance in your tissues, the only way to really get it out is to lose blood, and then so that your body has to pull iron from your tissues to help make the red blood cells in your bone marrow. So
and it's
basically,
man-made anthropogenic radiation screws up that process big time, right?
Does it ever?
Yeah, that's holy shit 90, stuff. Right? No, that's holy shit stuff tonight. That's a big piece of the equation that I wasn't aware of. I'm super glad. My goodness. Anything else you want to throw out there before?
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, hi, Mom. Yeah, I hear you. Hi, Mom. Thanks a lot. Your kid has done us a big favor here tonight. Okay, my friend. Thank you. Call in again when you want to scare the shit out of us, okay?
And take good care of yourself, Dana.
Yeah. I intend to, but your stories right now got me worried anyway. Okay, thank you, my friend. You have a great night.
Okay.
Yeah, bye-byes now. Yeah, bye-bye. Well, coming back. That's just such crazy stuff, eh? Because the CANDU reactors, first off, are way different than the boiling water reactors that are the predominant reactors worldwide. And we've talked about this before, where they do send, like in New Brunswick recently, they had a major release inside, they said inside the reactor, they had to send people in there, and you can do it, but they have to dress up in all kinds of gear. And then the numbers that they're going to claim that you got is going to be a fraction of what you really got. And humans are very tolerant, right? We can handle a pretty big dose, but your body has to attack everything that's damaged for the rest of your life in many cases, right? And we're talking about beta rays and gamma shines and neutron bursts and X-rays. We're talking about you need 4 feet lead suits on to protect you, so to speak. And they're not able to wear something like that, obviously, when they go into these chambers. We're talking about the CANDU reactors. You can't do it with the boiling water reactors. And it's just, the whole story just breaks my heart every time I hear stuff like it. It's like, again, right, it makes it hard because he just threw so much at me. It's going to take the weekend for me to analyze a lot of that. But that's important information anyway he threw out there. I'll have to listen to it again after. Public warned over missing radioactive cylinder in Thailand. Now the one they're talking about there is huge. The one that was lost in Australia was less than the size of the tip of your pinky. And he drove along the highway with Geiger counters, and when the Geiger count, it was equivalent to getting an X-ray when you drive past it at 50 miles an hour. And that was just the size as your pinky, right? And it was used in the same application for devices. So imagine something huge like they're talking about in Thailand. Yeah, that kind of freaked me out. Phone call. He's got a tendency to do that every time he calls me. Because it's like the truth is what it is. You got to deal with it. Or is it a second-hand shop? I can't wrap my mind around that facet of the story. Atoms for peace. There's literally no such thing as atoms for peace. There really isn't. Man-made anthropogenic radiation is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And it's like that for millions of years. It never goes away. It's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. If someone breaks the cylinder and you're directly exposed to it, you could be exposed to a high risk of cancer and serious illnesses. Well, there's 1,800 illnesses. It's not just cancer. But the little tiny one, not broken open, driving past it on the highway, the people in the cars at highway speeds were getting the equivalent of an X-ray, a chest X-ray, so to speak. And because it's contained, you're not breathing it into your body, you're getting this gamma shine, right? Because it's a gamma emitter. Large amount of radioactive isotopes released by Chernobyl, Fukushima nuclear disaster. Of course, whenever they talk about cesium-137, that's the cover story for the 1,000 other fission products would have been in the same sample. The cylinder weighs 25 kilograms, so it's well over 50 pounds. As part of equipment used to measure steam pressure and detect cracks in the pipes. So it shines through the pipes, and they can get basically an X-ray from the other side of it. A 1,200 pound sterling reward is being offered for information leading to the return by Britain. No, not by Britain, sorry. Which is a year's wage in the Philippines, or the Thailand rather, right? A cesium-2 that went missing in Western Australia after falling off a truck sparked an urgent search. It was smaller than the missing one in Thailand, was found by the side of the road. No, it was the size of the tip of your pinky. This one they're talking about is 50 pounds plus. China newspaper accused of skewing the Fukushima water release details. This is a media from the United States, New York-based global television network. They said that they started there to get away from communist China. But what they're claiming is a Chinese media outlet was quick to take a swipe at the plan, but that attempt quickly stalled after information came out that the Chinese reactor releases water even more polluted than the Japanese are proposing. But the water from the Japanese is vicious. They're pouring it over the reactor cores. That's not tritiated water like they're applying, right? And so shame on these creatures. This is obviously an anti-Chinese media fired up under disguise as some ostracized patriots or something, right? But the claim that China's reactors are naturally releasing water, like the water we're talking about from Japan's water, they're pouring over the melted reactor coriums. So the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel is going to be curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. Fukushima Food Fair opens in Hong Kong. They'll get them back anyway. And this is how they're going to get them back. Fukushima Food Fair. Fukushima. You know, Fukushima, right? Surrounded by 14 prefectures that are banned by 55 countries worldwide. The food is. Because, you know, it's so safe there, obviously. An event to promote food from the nuclear wasteland, surrounded by a nuclear wasteland, opened in Hong Kong on Friday. Hong Kong is the second largest export destination for radioactive Japanese food. Includes radioactive rice, radioactive sake, radioactive noodles, which are not subject to Hong Kong's import restrictions. Why wouldn't you have... really think that radiation doesn't affect everything? You think it only selects certain things? That's the people who got in charge. They're insane. No intentions of doing what's moral or ethical. Just whatever they feel like. They don't want you to get upset, so they pretend that they're doing anything. To prevent how safe Fukushima food is, well, just because food is delicious don't mean it's not radioactive. It's going to kill you in increments down the road. Freddy defies odds as the world's longest-lived invincible cyclone. This is a cyclone now that has defied all odds. You notice the cyclones, the typhoons, the hurricanes are coming ashore at over 200 mile per hour winds. We don't have any infrastructure for 200 mile per hour winds on the planet because that's not normal, right? We don't have building codes. You got to build your house a little bit stronger because we get 200 mile per hour winds here now because of Fukushima. And Fukushima heated the planet up, continues to heat. It was the catalyst. It was the tipping point. Like the planet was already got 80 years or 70 years at that time of constant emissions from 1,000 fuel pools. You got the endless dumping, all the nuclear bomb testing. You got all the accidents and events that were covered up. You got all the waste out. Like when you take into consideration how much waste just Hanford put into the planet, and just a single incident at Hanford, a nuclear reservation, a 585 square mile nuclear wasteland, just that one spot in a single incident in the late 1980s or 50s during the Manhattan Project dumped 450 billion gallons directly in the soil. So if you built an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, and wrapped it around the entire planet, that was just one dumping incident. Each liter is capable of killing everybody who walks past it at a subway for millions of years. Just dumped into the Columbia River, which flowed out into the Pacific Ocean. Like the British for decades had special cargo ships type vessels where they brought 45-gallon drums of nuclear waste out onto the ocean, and they just drove along. They didn't stop. They just kept driving along, throwing barrels over, dirty bombs, massive dirty bombs. And the barrels, when they get down, every 33 feet, there's an extra 14.5 pounds per square inch applied to them, right? Because of the pressure under the ocean. So when they get down to 300, 400, 500 feet, the tops of the barrels will just pop right off because it'll implode, right? And they knew it. And they knew that this would destroy the food chain down the road, which is now our generation. It was done on purpose. That's the standard in the nuclear industry, is this absolute contempt for everything and everybody. And they're doing it for their own little paychecks. which are not little. They get paid a lot of money to be stupid and monstrous. And they can't get the job unless they have those attributes. So you got the longest lasting typhoon is still killing people long past its shelf life. Longest lived cyclone the world has ever documented. And it's almost a perfectly straight line, just like the jet streams, which we've never seen before. The whole story is mad anyway. EU rewrites the climate diplomacy deal to resolve nuclear sticky points. Another disappointing story in nuclear. Go on, what's the odds, I wonder? European Union countries intend to push for a global phasing out of fossil fuel among their climate diplomacy priority, but the climate change is caused by 80 years of emissions into the environment. Their climate diplomacy priorities, their master plan, which the bloc hopes to approve this week after writing a contentious section on nuclear energy, that sets out the priority for next year in the EU at the UN Climate Summit, this year's UN Climate Summit, which is COP's 28, right? It's Constipated Party 28. And UN shouldn't exist. You know, Eisenhower warned you about him as the military-industrial complex, which is 195 militaries. And George Bush Senior called him New World Order a number of times. And we play that clip sometimes. Probably not tonight. Hey, why not? Let's play it. People don't even know who the New World Order is. It always shocks me. It's UN. It's 195 militaries, also known as the military-industrial complex. Let's play that little clip of George. You'll never get tired of that clip. Take it away, you demonic, sadistic demon. I mean, George. I'll adjust the audio on the fly. It's a short clip.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he called them the New World Order multiple times in just that little short clip. UN Climate Summit, which we covered last year and the year before, which is another greenwashing, right? Where nearly 200 countries will negotiate. So this is a couple of people from each country is going to make decisions that affects everybody in each of these countries. That is unsanctioned, that is illegal under the constitutions, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Cartas worldwide. They're not supposed to exist. They don't have any sovereignty over any country. UN is a corporation, just like McDonald's and Walmart. The shift towards a climate-neutral economy, but they have 500 subsidy companies like the World Health Organization, the UNICEF, the International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, UNCLEAR, the ICPP. They have all these corporations that sets policies for everybody worldwide, but they don't have the authority to implement it. They do it through sedition. By taking a few people in your country, put them in key positions, and with the stroke of a pen, they assassinate everybody's future. The shift towards a climate-neutral economy. Climate-neutral economy. Because Fukushima was a tipping point, right? This was the straw that broke the planet's back. And now this so-called New World Order, a.k.a. military-industrial complex, has decided now to go, they call the shots for every country worldwide. And the rest follow like nice little sheep. EU was systematically promote and call for a global move towards energy systems free of unabated fossil fuel, and they put nuclear, which is the cause of everything, on the pedestal itself. Like, and that's why it works, right? That's how they have always done it. On top of that, some countries are hoping the constipated Party 28 summit can clinch a deal on phasing out the use of CO2 emitting fossil fuel, and so they're trying to blame fossil fuel for the pollution. So 15 of the world's biggest container ships produce more pollution than every car on the planet combined. There's 90,000 of these container ships on the ocean at any given time. That's equal to over 4 trillion people in automotive vehicles, comparison to what's here now, each day. So if you want to go after the emissions, you would go after the container ships. Not pretend that let me explain. I got another way of explaining it. Because this is actually really simple. Here's what global warming is. This is after 16 days of radioactive fallout from Japan. Covers the whole planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't cover the planet. They don't have models of gas, oil, and coal emissions like this. They're huge particles. They don't travel only at best 100 miles, and then they fall down and get assimilated into the earth because they come from the earth. Fossil fuels are the elements of stardust, right? They're produced by the same elements are produced by the sun, right? But the sun doesn't produce anthropogenic man-made isotopes. And so the man-made anthropogenic isotopes are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. So think of a snowstorm that after 16 days covers the whole planet. Instead of being cold, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light, and you can see it. Then you get it, see? But that's why I use these models to help you appreciate what I'm talking about. And imagine if the snow after 16 days covers the whole planet snowstorm, and it never stops snowing, and it does that for millions of years. But instead of snow, it's just heat, and that's what nuclear does. So gas, oil, and coal emissions don't cover the planet and don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second for millions of years. The only thing that does that is the nuclear emissions, and nuclear is constant emissions. So when you hear the word climate change, they cooked that up decades ago because they knew that was the ultimate outcome of the radiation emissions going on for all these decades. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide creating plumes like this each day. It's 100. That's why they don't have a repository, because you don't want to stop it. They want everything dead. That's why we refer to them sometimes as some kind of weird alien race, because they hate all species, including the bacteria and the fungus. What if the bacteria and fungus, which is what we're killing right the last number of years, since Fukushima in particular, which was the tipping point, that takes away the ability of the forest to soak up water and stay cool, right? Instead, the forest now is tinder dry, and if you get a lightning strike, none of the foliage or litter is broken down because you kill the bacteria and the fungus. And when you get a lightning strike, now you have these massive forest fires, and that the emissions from the forest fire, because they're not heavy anymore, they're already dried out, they float around and they start other forest fires, see? They can move long distances, because normally the forest was fairly heavy because it retains so much water, but it can't retain the water and it doesn't draw the water anymore, because it would produce its own rain, its own. There was this system, right, of a proposal by India to do this gained some support at last year's UN Climate Summit. And India has an absolute atrocious legacy with their nuclear waste, dumping it into the drinking waters. They got 10,000 people arrested after Fukushima were protesting a nuclear plant and charged them with sedition for protesting. That kind of industry has no right to exist, see? And it only does that because it's it comes from this legacy of arrogance, of hubris, which ministers must then approve formally. And of course, there's not a minister out there who's not going to approve it. The proof has been delayed, however, by disputes over the roles of nuclear energy in the green transition. But there is no, nuclear can't be green. It has no green attributes whatsoever. It's the most resource-intensive industry in human history. And for a nuclear plant to work, it needs 2 gas oil coal plants dedicated to it 24 hours a day to build it, to run it, and for 60 or 100 years after the decommissioning. Specifically, countries could not agree on whether the EU diplomacy should promote low-carbon hydrogen. Hydrogen produced from nuclear is not going to really low, so-called... again, using the word carbon. Without carbon, there's no trees, no plants, there's no insects, there's no biota, there's no life. Without carbon, there wouldn't be a single creature on the planet. Carbon is your friend. They can't say nuclear, see? They can't say isotopes, right? Because then you're talking about anthropogenic man-made. And then the gig is up for them. They got 80 years of telling the same lie, and the lie has to get bigger for them to survive each year. Each generation of students have to regurgitate the same lies. And this is why when you look back over the legacy, that's exactly what you're going to see. They're a direct threat to all species and the future of humanity. Humanity can't exist and nuclear at the same time. And now we're seeing it come to fruition, this 80 years of arrogance. The draft said EU diplomacy would also promote sustainable low-carbon technologies, a phase that often refers to nuclear energy, because it's not low. Like calling it a low-carbon technology, this was 2015 Paris Accord, right? This bunch of scumbags became the, what's the word for it? It became prolific in the narrative worldwide. Everything had to be blamed on carbon, and they hit you from everywhere you go, and you start regurgitating that same narrative, and then you lose. The nuclear issues have already disrupted negotiations on EU renewable energy targets. Some diplomats fear it could delay other laws needed to meet the climate goals. You can't meet the climate goals with 1,000 fuel pools worldwide hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day. Geothermal startup shows its wells can be used like a giant underground battery. So all the wells they drilled looking for oil can be also used for batteries. That's such an important story. And geothermal, of course, they expect by 2050 half the planet will run on geothermal because people will come to their senses soon, right? But it's going to be 50 billion over the next decade in just drill bits for geothermal. This industry is about to take off. That's the future. Hungarian authorities hold multiple city promotions of geothermal. So geothermal is entering the conversation. Wind and solar should be secondary to geothermal. There should be like something for you shouldn't do wind and solar without geothermal. Geothermal is your batteries, so to speak, right? Where it doesn't need anything. It can run the city on its own. But because wind and solar are very useful, you'd be remiss not to use it in the equation. But the guaranteed power should never be nuclear, never gas, oil, or coal. It should be geothermal. Geothermal can be built all gas, oil, coal plants and nuclear plants. And when they're finished, just switch off the commodity intensive resources and just use geothermal. Had a nuclear lobby scuttled, had a nuclear lobby, lobbying, which is illegal under the American Constitution, the Canadian Bill of Rights, and the British Magna Carta, which is the doctrines used for most so-called democracies, which doesn't exist in the Constitution, by the way. The word democracy, because it was a republic where everybody had equal rights, whereas a democracy, 51% can take away the rights of the other 49%. And so a democracy was about taking away your rights. It was never about equal rights, because we already had that. It was called a republic worldwide. Succumbing to member states, in fact, Justice Hugo Black, a former Supreme Court justice in the 40s, had wrote an eloquent dissent on how absurd it was that an amendment meant to free the slaves from an oppressive government was being used by corporations to give corporations certain human rights, and that was a complete misinterpretation of why the human rights for black people was created, right? It was meant to free them from an oppressive government. So instead, a law meant to free people from an oppressive government was used to oppress a sovereign people, which was everybody. And it's unconstitutional. Now it's spilled over into Canada and to the EU and other countries that have similar documents. He warned you in the 40s with an eloquent dissent. So the nuclear lobby in the EU was 560 appointed parliament members versus 516 appointed parliament members. So 560 voted nuclear is green. But nuclear can never be green. It has the idea of the taxonomy, the so-called EU taxonomy, was to label renewable, and everything else is non-renewable. Nuclear was one of them. So the minute that what they call greenwashing, that they labeled nuclear, then now you can really, and when you see that many people, right, swing that way, 560 parliament votes called it renewable. It was an absurd suggestion. And so what was the point of having a taxonomy when it was going to be used to bludgeon common sense? One year ago, his hopes were high for what was considered to be the most important environmental legislation in Europe. European Union taxonomy regulation was meant to become the global gold standard for science-based policy that directs investments towards climate-friendly goals. Again, the word climate is a contentious word. For a long-delayed decision was made by the European Commission that ultimately included nuclear power and gas as environmentally sustainable economic activities, and that the Climate Complementary Delegated Act, a non-legislative supplement to the regulation, was adopted March 9, 2022, and we vehemently come out and opposed it, and came into effect on January the 1st, which was because the EU, no government is in power for more than 6 months. And on January the 1st, France stepped into power for 6 months, right, of 2022, January 1st. And that was the day that they enacted it as law. And France's legacy, France, got all of its uranium from Niger, which they caused a civil war in for over 60 years and destroyed every facet of government and the country itself, so that France could have cheap uranium. And when you look at what France done to the French Polynesians for 4 decades, setting off nuclear weapons, and denied them even today. What is it, 8, 9, 10 administrations all denied the French Polynesians rights, any rights. Still, it's just, you can't have a future doing stuff like that, and so you don't. And that the Climate Complementary Delegated Act was a non-legislative supplement, but it was adopted by the French when they took over the EU January 1st, 2022. And it's been challenged by Austria, a number of NGOs, and a member of the European Parliament. But they just shoved it through, and they have a lot of persuasions. And then the people that were there won't even be there by the time it makes it into court. Right? They get positions for 6 months, shake a few hands, make a bunch of money, and walk away. And they get all this money, and everybody else worldwide is destroyed. So why having a system like that? So it can actually, Dana, so it can do exactly that. Their argument is that, so there's people out there that are in key positions that are guaranteed you can't have a future because that's how they make their money, by you having, and them having no future, their loved ones having no future. Their argument is the sustainable label gives nuclear breaches the EU climate commitment, violates EU environmental laws, and incompatible with do no significant harm. And nuclear is nothing but harm. The criteria of the taxonomy regulation itself, the EC refuses to revoke the act, leading the complainants to launch a lawsuit, but they're not going to pay for it. The people that betrayed, right, all of these countries, they're not going to get a fine. They're not going to get a criminal record. They'll pay the EU itself will pay a fine and keep the law. That is the betrayal itself. As we await the court's decision, it's important to recall how this legislation was undermined by the nuclear lobbying group. But the nuclear lobbying has put us on the road to evil. Nuclear energy, natural gas initially failed to meet the taxonomy criteria. Of course, that went against big interest in the energy sector, and predictably, a lobbying blitz was launched to reverse the decision. So you got 7,500 lobbyists calling you or texting you, sending you emails, coming at you with suitcases of cash, and do no significant harm to the environment, which is all nuclear does. It's endless, relentless, perpetual harm. The challenge was to find such enterprise to prevent the good intentions of the Green Deal from being hijacked by companies practicing greenwashing. And so the law was created specifically to do this, so that, and the idea of calling it, labeling it renewables, was private investors could direct money to it and get a tax break on top of that. So it was completely, every facet of it was completely dishonest and disingenuous. A lobbying campaign worth millions of euros was initiated to amend the regulations in favor of natural gas and nuclear. False narratives of clean nuclear was also peddled by intergovernmental organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, which shouldn't exist. These agencies should never exist. The country has no control whatsoever and no say in anything, and then they bootleg this as if it has some added, some redeeming qualities, but it has nothing. It's a perpetual disease factory on top of it. The UN Economic Commission for Europe. These are all the same organization. These are all UN. So you got all UN subsidies companies being mentioned as supporting the documentation, but they're the same organization. Common claim made in a letter to the EC is that nuclear energy has a low carbon emission status. Again, this is a brutally fabled false narrative to suggest. First off, the word carbon is weaponized. Carbon is obviously not causing the climate change. Carbon emissions don't make plumes that covers the planet pulsing energy every second. Mining, transporting, building, decommissioning. The Sizewell C in Hinkley Point in the United Kingdom right now are the biggest projects in history, construction projects. Does that sound resource free to anybody? Everything used there has to be triple inspected independently of each other. For the best, only the best of the best. And everything is going to be bombarded with neutrons over decades. And 90% of it is going to be too radioactive to be reused. But they've changed the laws so many times just in the last decade, they can reuse most of the stuff There's radioactive. We make radioactive forks and radioactive bumpers and radioactive sinks for you and your loved ones. They're 100% unequivocal. The nuclear industry has gone omnicide against the entire planet. It's attacking every species. So the nuclear lobbying group, I can go down all the details, but what's the point? The nuclear delusion. There's an understatement, nuclear delusion. Al Jazeera put out a nuclear trailer for their nuclear 12th anniversary Fukushima, and they got Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldicott as the main people, two perpetual lawyers, two pro-nuclear lobbying groups disguised as anti-nuclear. Terrestrial Energy opens a nuclear technology development office in Calgary, Canada. Alberta just had 2 earthquakes today, for goodness sakes. And they'll be there for 20 or 30 years pretending that they're going to be small modular reactors just so they can loot the Canadian government, because they basically come from the Canadian government, started up these corporations because they knew there was money to steal, right? Like NuScale, been around 18 years. It doesn't have anything. But it has a license, it says, but which is incomplete into the non-regulatory agency. That is rubber stamped, despite the fact that it's incomplete. You're talking about a million pieces of paper. Right? And so normally you got to take that, go through the million pieces of paper, which takes a big team for the regulatory agencies, 4 or 5 years. And then they got to find the flaws, then they got to re-engineer everything again, so that takes another 4 or 5 years. Then they got to build a pilot project and test out the theory. Then they got to re-engineer everything, get out all the flaws. That's going to take 10 years. So you're looking at 30, 40, 50 years before you actually get into production if you had good intentions. But this is about you coming up with those solutions and having memorandums of understanding so you exclude anything new that comes along on top of it. Only nuclear is allowed to exist. That's what basically these organizations perpetrate upon humanity. And so we're going to poll, and that shows you how arrogant this industry really is. Did the nuclear industry build nuclear power plants and farmlands worldwide to maim, poison, and kill people in supermarkets and everywhere else for decades and decades and decades? Yes. All nuclear power plants' fuel pools are hemorrhaging into the environment. The last thing you want, you don't see coal plants in farmland, you don't see oil plants in farmland, you don't see gas plants in farmlands. But almost all nuclear power plants are in prime, active farmlands because you're moving the product out all the time. And it's not just to get rid of the bioaccumulation in the surrounding area, it's directly to poison you. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an industry that hates all species. Nothing but contempt for every species out there. That's what nuclear is. Nuclear is a betrayal against all 8 million species in the future of humanity. You can't have a future, again, let me reinforce it. You can't have a future and nuclear at the same time. You simply can't. Radioactive fallout, everything that's released is forever. It never goes away. It's pulsing energy every time, every second. Gets in your body attacks it constantly every second because it's wrecking all the chromosomes and DNA and stem cells and everything else. Your body's got to repair that, but it can't keep up with it. So now your immune system is compromised. You're more susceptible the pathogens and viruses and illnesses and diseases that were normally harmless and innocuous are now lethal to everybody, right? Because your immune system is compromised. So that's why you say there's 1,800 diseases that'll manifest from radiation poisoning, and everybody's being poisoned. This model is 19.5 days of radioactive fallout. Let me see here. I guess we'll call it a night. I'm feeling pretty burnt out. Just from the week, right? We'll take a few days off, hopefully. Now, we're expecting Japan to have a massive earthquake. Last year, on the 16th, which is today, they had a massive earthquake right off the coastline. Same thing the year before, same thing the year before that. And so we're expecting another one anytime at all this year. But, you know, that one down on the Mississippi, nuclear power plant down on the Mississippi River, that's a very concerning, that story is very concerning. Because it's obvious they're lying about every facet of the story. And the original story is just disgusting contempt for everybody. So imagine what the next ones are going to be. We'll be keeping an eye on it. But that's how the industry rolls. If it's evil, they're all in. If it's scumduggery, then they're all in every single time. They don't hire good people, they only hire scum. And that's what we're seeing the results of. Again, you can't keep up with how evil this industry is. And it always surprises me, but it should never surprise you. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everyone. Bless your hearts. James Lucid donated 130 last night. That was excellent. And there's links at the bottom of the description. There's 2 ways to donate. Hope everybody stays safe out there. Don't buy anything from Japan, for goodness sakes. Don't poison your loved ones. Check your cupboards and get rid of it if it's from Japan. Be very careful about buying food from the nuclear wasteland. The scum, degenerate, demonic nuclear wasteland that is Japan, and the Mississippi area, and Hanford, and Santa Susana. All the other nuclear dump sites. Don't buy anything. You got 1,000 fuel pools worldwide surrounded by farms. You don't want to buy food from any of them places. How do you avoid them, see? Okay, well, we're going to close the poll down. Let's give it one more boot. Did the nuclear degenerate scum monstrous industry build nuclear power plants in farmlands worldwide to maim, kill, and harm? By the way, there's the Minnesota nuclear power plant that lost all that radioactive sludge. Well, it's surrounded by farms. That was the first story we covered tonight. I forgot to show that picture. Surrounded by farms. We got 49 votes on the poll. 49 votes. The nuclear industry always hate it when we talk about farms, so we usually get a bit of spam from the nuclear industry at that point. We'll end the poll right there. Have a great night, great weekend, everybody. we'll be paying attention because we're expecting an earthquake this weekend, even tonight or tomorrow, right close to the ongoing multiple reactors that are melting down in Japan. Thank you, Dana Nasana, for moderating. I don't say it enough, I'm sure. We appreciate have someone out there to keep the crazies at bay. And I haven't done a shout out for quite a while. Maybe next week. I still owe Dana a guitar on one of these next videos. I haven't forgot. And we'll catch everybody on Sunday. I'm terrified of what's going to show up between now and Sunday. Yeah, hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. I'll come in and read the comments after. We'll do a shout out on Sunday. How about that? I kind of ran out of steam here tonight. So we almost made 2 hours. Yeah, pray for no earthquake is right. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Great day. Have a great weekend. I know it's hard, but still got to try, so take care, folks. Okay, if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you can. If not, no biggie. We'll see everybody on Sunday's show. Take care, folks.